The sedan's engine purred like a predator in the pre-dawn silence. Amaya Lewis pressed her back against the leather seat, watching the city blur past through tinted windows that made everything look like a dream she couldn't wake from. "You think very small, if you believe we came here for his legs," the man across from her had said just minutes ago, standing in her doorway like judgment itself. "We came for what the debt was designed to buy." Now trapped in luxury that felt more like a cage, she understood what he meant. Her brother Devon's loan hadn't been about money at all. It had been about her. The Korean man, Kwon Sung-min, she'd learned, sat opposite her with the stillness of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. His charcoal suit was immaculate despite the early hour, his dark eyes calculating as they studied her face. "If you're going to hurt me," she said, refusing to let her voice shake, "you could have done it at my door, so why am I here?" One corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something more dangerous. "Because someone used my name to set a trap," he replied, "and you're going to help me spring it back on them." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they sparked something fierce in her chest, a recognition that maybe, for once, she wasn't just going to be the victim of someone else's game. Welcome to Korean Mafia Lovers. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring you these intense romance stories. The first knock came before the sun, not the clumsy, dragging knock of a neighbor, not the impatient pounding of a landlord. It was 3 firm taps that made the thin wood of the apartment door vibrate and sent a pulse of dread down Amaya Lewis's spine. She was already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug she couldn't afford to break. The unpaid utility bills were stacked beside it like an accusation. Her brother's room was silent down the hallway. For a moment, she let herself pretend the knock was a mistake. Then it came again. 3 precise strikes. "Amaya." Devon's hoarse whisper drifted from his doorway. "You heard that?" "Stay in your room," she murmured, rising. "Don't open your mouth for anyone." She crossed the living room, bare feet against cold floorboards, and glanced through the peephole. Men in suits, not the cheap kind, either. Dark, perfectly fitted, worn by people who stood with their backs straight because they knew someone else would always bend first. A black sedan idled at the curb behind them, exhaust clouding in the pale grey air of early morning. One man stood a step ahead of the others. He wasn't the tallest, but he was the one every gaze orbited around. Korean, immaculate, calm in a way that felt dangerous. Amaya's pulse stuttered. She opened the door, stopping it with her hip before it swung all the way. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice steady by sheer will. The front man let his gaze travel over her face, the worn t-shirt, the old sweatpants, the tired eyes. He took in the faded couch behind her, the cracked paint, the life hanging by threads. "You're Amaya Lewis, he said, not a question. "Yes. We're here about your brother's loan." The words landed like a fist to the gut. Devon. She'd begged him not to take money from the wrong people. He'd promised it was just a short-term thing. She hadn't realized which wrong people. "My brother isn't," she started. "He's alive," the man said, reading the fear in her eyes. "For now." Behind her, she sensed Devon creeping closer down the hall. "Devon," she said sharply without looking back, "go back to your room." The man's mouth curved, not quite into a smile. "He can come. It might be educational." "I'm not making my brother watch you break his legs in my living room," she snapped. One of the suits flinched, but the man in front didn't. "You think very small if you believe we came here for his legs," he replied. "We came for what the debt was designed to buy." "And what's that?" she demanded. He held her gaze, the dawn light cutting across his cheekbones. "You," he said. "You're coming with me." The words should have sounded like a sentence. Instead, they sounded like the opening move of a game she hadn't known she'd been playing. His name, she learned 10 minutes later in the back seat of the sedan, was Kwon Sung-min. She'd heard the surname before in the kind of conversations people lowered their voices to have, about ports, about missing shipments, about men who didn't go to prison. They simply stopped being a problem. Devon had tried to lunge between them when the men escorted her to the car. Sung-min didn't touch him, didn't have to. One glance from those cold, dark eyes had pinned her brother in place. "You signed your name," Sung-min had said to Devon, as 2 of his men restrained the younger man with minimal force. "Now you don't get to decide how I collect," Devon had shouted, cursed, begged. Amaya had said his name once. firm. Warning. He'd gone quiet. Now the city rolled by outside the tinted windows, bathed in the blue-grey pre-dawn. Amaya kept her chin up, refusing to shrink into the leather seat. "If you're going to hurt me," she said, "you could have done it at my door, so why am I here?" Xiongmin sat opposite her in the spacious back cabin, legs relaxed, hands resting loosely on his knees. If not for the faint shadow of bruising near his collarbone and the subtle tension at the corner of his jaw, she might have thought this was just another day for him. "You talk as if you've done this before," he observed. "Men with power like to knock early," as she said. "They think it gives them the advantage." "It does." "I'm still here," she replied, "so maybe not as much as you think." One of his men shifted, but Xiongmin's gaze didn't leave her face. "Your brother thinks he took out a loan from my people," he said. "He didn't." Amaya's fingers curled around the hem of her shirt. "The paperwork had your crest, your name." "It had a version of my crest," as Xiongmin corrected, "and a forged signature. The amount was too small and the terms too sloppy. I don't deal in crumbs." "Then who did?" "That's what I'm going to use you to find out." The Quan organization's headquarters didn't look like a lair. It looked like an office building for a very successful, very private company. Smoked glass, quiet lobby, elevators that moved without sound. But the security inside told a different story. Men with discreet earpieces, cameras angled from places most people wouldn't think to look, a hum of controlled purpose. Xiongmin led her to a conference room with one glass wall overlooking the waking city. A digital map glowed across the far end of the table, districts marked in different shades, lines tracing routes Amaya didn't recognize. "This is our territory," he said, gesturing. "And these," he tapped at certain nodes, "are the points where we've been hit in the last 6 months. Shipping interference, anonymous tips to customs, mysterious lost cargo." "And you think whoever came for my brother is tied to this?" she asked. "I know they are," he replied. "They've been testing me, quietly pushing. Today was the first time they put hands near something I consider mine." He didn't mean property, he meant control. He turned to her. "Tell me exactly how your brother got that contract." She told him. The dingy back office of a payday lending place that had popped up 2 weeks before their eviction notice. The smooth-talking man in a charcoal blazer who seemed too professional for the neighborhood. The way he had looked at Amaya more than Devon as he explained the terms, sliding the paper across the desk as if it were a gift. "He said we'd never see interest that low again," she said bitterly, "and that having your name on it made it ironclad." "Anything else?" Xiongmin asked. "He wore a ring," she said, "on his right hand, thick, silver, had 3 tiny diagonal lines etched into it. One of Xiongmin's lieutenants swore under his breath, "Guanseo outfit." Xiongmin's gaze hardened. "You're sure about the lines?" "As sure as I am about that tattoo under your cuff," she shot back. His eyes flicked to her wrist, then to his own. She'd noticed the ink earlier. Observant. He liked that. "The Guanseo group has been biting at our roots for months," he said. "They work in finance camouflage, shell companies, fake lenders, numbers that look legitimate until you dig deeper." "And they're using families like mine as bait," she said. "Yes." It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. "Why not go to the police, Mount?" she asked. He tilted his head. "Do you think the police care that a crime family forged my crest to trick your brother?" She didn't answer. He didn't need one. The plan formed faster than Amaya expected. She remembered the lender's eyes, the way he'd flinched when a name was mentioned on the phone in the back room. She remembered the logo on the forms, a small, forgettable design in the corner. She described the layout, the smell, the way the fluorescent light flickered above the desk. "They'll shut that store down now that the trap's been sprung," Xiongmin said, "but they'll move the operation. And they'll think no one noticed." "Except you," she said. "Except us," he corrected. One of his men, a lean guy with a scar along his jaw, cleared his throat. "Boss, with respect, bringing a civilian into this is risky. If Guanseo realizes she's involved—" "They already involved her," Xiongmin cut in. "I'm simply choosing not to leave her as unwitting collateral." Amaya didn't flinch at being discussed like a factor in an equation. It was less dehumanizing than the way most systems treated her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Identify faces," Xiongmin said. "Places, people from your world we don't have files on. And during the final move—" He hesitated, which she hadn't seen him do before. "You're the only one who can confirm the man at the center. is the one who sat across from you. You mean be there, she said, in the middle of it. Yes. She let that sit. And if I say no? Then we proceed with what we have in, he replied. It'll be messier, longer. You won't be any safer. She stared at the map on the wall. She thought about her mother's hands cracked from double shifts, about her brother swallowing fear like broken glass, about the smooth-talking man in the charcoal blazer who'd smiled when he slid their life onto a dotted line. I'm tired of people like that making moves while everyone like me just survives it, she said. So if this is my chance to punch back, I'm taking it. One corner of his mouth lifted, not in triumph but respect. Then we finish this, he said. 3 days later, Amaya found herself in the passenger seat of an unmarked car, watching a glass office building through binoculars that cost more than her monthly rent. The business center looked legitimate, corporate logo, steady stream of people in professional attire. Nothing that screamed criminal enterprise, but she'd learned to look deeper. Third floor corner office, and she murmured into the comm device tucked behind her ear. That's where they took Devon to sign. Seungmin's voice crackled back, calm and focused. Any security you remember? One guard at the front desk looked bored, but there was a camera pointed at the elevator bank that seemed newer than the rest. Good eye. She'd been working with his team for 72 hours now, and the dynamic had surprised her. They didn't treat her like a liability or a witness to be managed. They listened when she spoke, incorporated her observations into their planning, trusted her instincts about the civilian side of the operation. It helped that she was right more often than not. Movement on the 5th floor, came a voice through the comm, Jin, the tech specialist, who'd been monitoring their surveillance feeds. 3 men just entered through the service elevator, not on the building directory. Amaya adjusted the binoculars. Can you get a visual on their faces? Working on it, got one, sending to your tablet now. The image appeared on the screen, mounted to the dashboard. Amaya studied it, then shook her head. I don't recognize him, but his posture, she frowned. He's military, or was, the way he holds his shoulders. Guanseo's been recruiting ex-military, Seungmin said through the comm, trying to professionalize their operation. Well, they're about to learn the difference between professional and prepared, she replied. A pause, then quietly. You don't have to do this, Amaya. We can still pull you out. She looked at the building, thinking about all the families who'd walked into those offices desperate and walked out trapped. I'm not going anywhere. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Amaya would enter the building as herself, a woman looking for emergency financial assistance. She'd wear a wire, identify the key players, and confirm the layout they'd mapped from building schematics. When she gave the signal, Seungmin's team would move in from multiple entry points. What could go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. The first sign of trouble came when she reached the 3rd floor and found the office space completely reconfigured. Where there should have been the payday lending storefront, she found a generic business consulting firm with fresh paint and furniture that still smelled like the warehouse. They moved, she whispered into her collar mic. This isn't right. Stay calm, Seungmin's voice in her ear. Ask for directions, act lost. She approached the receptionist, a young woman who looked as confused as Amaya felt. Excuse me, I'm looking for Rapid Financial Solutions. I thought they were on this floor. Oh, they moved out last week, the receptionist said. I think they went to the building across the street. 5th floor, maybe? Amaya's blood chilled. Across the street was a building they hadn't surveilled, hadn't mapped, hadn't prepared for. Change of plans, she murmured, as she headed back to the elevator. They're not here. But as the elevator doors opened, she found herself face to face with the man in the charcoal blazer, the one who'd smiled at Devon while sliding the contract across the desk. He looked at her for a long moment, recognition dawning in his eyes. Well, he said, stepping into the elevator with her, this is unexpected. The doors closed. Amaya's hand moved instinctively toward the panic button on her wire, but his voice stopped her. I wouldn't, he said conversationally. The signal won't reach your friends from here anyway. This building has excellent interference. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice level. I think you have me confused with someone else. Amaya Lewis, he said, sister of Devon Lewis, currently under the protection of Kwon Sungmin, who I'm sure is listening to this conversation with great interest. The elevator began moving, but not to the ground floor. Up. The thing about traps, the man continued, is that they work both ways. You came here to catch me, but I've been waiting for you to come. The elevator stopped at the 7th floor. The doors opened to reveal 2 more men, and beyond them, a hallway that definitely wasn't part of any legitimate business operation. You're coming with me, he said, echoing the words that had started this whole nightmare. But this time, Amaya smiled. Actually, she said, I don't think I am. And she pressed the button she'd been palming since the moment she'd seen his face, not the panic button on her wire, but the one Seung-min had given her for emergencies. The building's fire suppression system activated with a deafening roar. Chaos erupted in the building as water cascaded from the sprinkler system and emergency alarms shrieked through the halls. In the confusion, Amaya broke free from the elevator and ran, not toward the stairwell, but deeper into the 7th floor, following the mental map Seung-min had drilled into her during their planning sessions. Find a defensible position. Stay on comms. Trust the team. But as she rounded a corner, she realized the team might not be coming. Seung-min, she whispered into her collar mic. Can you hear me? Static. Jin? Anyone? Nothing. The interference the man had mentioned wasn't just blocking outgoing signals, it was blocking everything. She was alone in a building full of people who wanted to use her as leverage against the most dangerous man in the city. She found an empty office and locked the door, pressing her back against it as she tried to think. Through the window she could see the street below, the building where Seung-min's team was supposed to be coordinating the operation. No movement, no sign of the rapid response they'd planned. Either they couldn't get to her or... The thought hit her like ice water. What if this wasn't just a trap for her? What if it was a trap for all of them? The door handle rattled. Miss Lewis, came the smooth voice from the hallway. There's no point in hiding. We just want to talk. Funny way of showing it, she called back, scanning the office for anything she could use as a weapon. You're right to be cautious, the voice continued. After all, you've learned not to trust people who make promises they can't keep, like Kwon Sung-min. Her hands stilled on the letter opener she'd been examining. What's that supposed to mean? Did he tell you about the last woman who helped him with an operation like this? Park Min-jung, very brave, very determined, very dead. Amaya's chest tightened. Seung-min had never mentioned anyone named Park Min-jung. He has a pattern, you see, the voice went on. He finds someone desperate, someone with nothing to lose, and he convinces them they're partners, equals. But when the shooting starts, somehow, they're always the ones who don't make it out. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself this. Why did he really bring you into this operation? Because he needed your help? Or because he needed someone expendable? The words hit harder than they should have, finding the doubts she'd been trying to ignore. Why had Seung-min trusted her so quickly? Why had he given her so much access to his operation? Why had he seemed almost relieved when she'd volunteered to be in the field? The door splintered inward. 3 men entered, led by the one in the charcoal blazer, but they didn't grab her immediately. Instead, he pulled out a tablet and set it on the desk between them. I want to show you something, he said. The screen displayed security footage from outside the building. Timestamp 15 minutes ago. She watched herself enter the lobby, watched Seung-min's team take their positions around the perimeter. Then she watched them leave, all of them. Cars pulling away, men walking casually down the street. No urgency, no concern, no rescue coming. He left you, the man said gently. The moment you were inside, he pulled his people back. You were never the asset in this operation, Miss Lewis. You were the sacrifice. Amaya stared at the screen, her mind reeling. It couldn't be true. The way Seung-min had looked at her, the way he'd listened to her ideas, the way he'd promised to keep Devon safe. But the footage didn't lie. Why? She whispered. Because this was never about stopping us, the man replied. It was about eliminating a rival. You see, I don't work for Gwanseo. I work for someone much closer to Kwon Sung-min, someone who's been waiting for the right moment to take his place. He gestured to one of his men, who produced a phone and dialed a number. Tell him we have her, the man said into the phone. Then to Amaya, someone wants to speak with you. He held out the phone. Against her better judgment, she took it. Amaya. The voice was familiar, warm, concerned. Are you hurt? It was Jin, the tech specialist, the one who'd been monitoring their communications, who'd had access to all their plans, who'd known exactly where she'd be and when. You, she breathed. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Jin said, but Seungmin was never going to let you walk away from this. He doesn't let anyone walk away. I'm offering you something he never could, a real choice. What choice? Help us finish what we started, and you and your brother disappear. New identities, new city, enough money to start over anywhere you want, or stay loyal to a man who's already written you off as collateral damage. Amaya looked at the men surrounding her, at the tablet still showing the empty street where Seungmin's team should have been. And if I refuse, then you become another cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. The phone went dead. Amaya stood in the ruined office, water still dripping from the sprinklers, surrounded by enemies who were offering her the one thing she'd never had, a way out. All she had to do was betray the man who'd apparently already betrayed her. The choice should have been simple. So why did it feel like tearing her heart in half? The explosion came from below. Not the controlled, precise kind that Seungmin's team would use, but something raw and desperate. The sound of someone fighting their way through obstacles they hadn't planned for. The men around Amaya tensed, hands moving to weapons, but she felt something else entirely. Hope. That's not possible, the man in the charcoal blazer said, speaking rapidly into his radio. You said they pulled back, you said... His voice cut off as another explosion shook the building, closer this time. Amaya looked at the tablet again, studying the timestamp on the security footage, 15 minutes ago. But the building's interference would have made real-time monitoring impossible. Which meant, "You're showing me old footage," she said. The man's eyes snapped to her. What? This is from yesterday, isn't it? Or the day before? You've been planning this for days, waiting for me to walk into your trap, but you needed me to believe I'd been abandoned, so you showed me footage of the team leaving from a completely different operation. One of the other men shifted nervously. Boss, we should move. If Kwon's people are actually... They're not, the man snapped. But doubt flickered in his eyes. The building's lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. But in that moment of darkness, Amaya heard something that made her heart leap. The distinctive whistle Seungmin had taught her during their planning sessions. 3 short bursts. The all-clear signal. He was here. Jin lied to you, she said, backing toward the window. Just like you lied to me. The difference is, I know which one of them actually keeps his promises. The man raised his gun. You're not going anywhere. You're right, she said. I'm not. And she dove sideways as the office window exploded inward. Seungmin came through the glass like vengeance itself, moving with lethal precision. The first gunman went down before he could fire. The second managed to get a shot off, but it went wide as Seungmin's elbow connected with his jaw. The man in the charcoal blazer tried to use Amaya as a shield, but she was already moving. Using the self-defense techniques Seungmin had insisted on teaching her during their brief partnership. A strike to the wrist, a twist away from the gun, a knee to the solar plexus that left him gasping. By the time the smoke cleared, 3 men were on the ground and Seungmin was checking Amaya for injuries with hands that shook almost imperceptibly. Are you hurt? He demanded. I'm fine, she said. But Jin is in custody, Seungmin finished. Has been for the last hour. We've been tracking his communications, feeding him false information about our movements. When he told his contacts that you were alone in the building, we knew exactly where to find you. Amaya stared at him. So you never abandoned me? Never, he said fiercely. The footage they showed you was from last week's surveillance run. We've been watching this building for days, waiting for them to make their move. But why didn't you tell me it was a setup? Because we needed your reactions to be genuine, he admitted. If you'd known it was a trap, you might have acted differently, they might have suspected. She wanted to be angry about the deception, but looking at his face, the relief, the barely controlled fear, the way his hands lingered on her shoulders as if reassuring himself she was really there, she couldn't manage it. So what now? She asked. Now we finish this, he said. The cleanup was swift and thorough. Jin's betrayal had exposed a network of corruption that went deeper than anyone had suspected. But with his cooperation, motivated by a desire to avoid a very unpleasant end, they were able to roll up the entire operation within hours. The man in the charcoal blazer, whose real name was Park Dong-wook, turned out to be a mid-level player in a scheme to destabilize Seungmin's organization from within. The forged loan documents, the targeting of vulnerable families, the elaborate trap, all of it had been designed to provoke Seungmin into making mistakes, to give his enemies openings they could exploit. Instead, it had given him something else entirely. A partner who could see angles he'd missed, who could navigate worlds he couldn't access, who could stand beside him without flinching when the shooting started. Later, as dawn broke over the city for the second time since this all began, Amaya found herself back in Seung-min's office, watching him coordinate the final phases of the operation with quiet efficiency. Devon was safe. The false debt had been erased from every record that mattered. The men who'd threatened her family were either in custody or no longer in a position to threaten anyone. It was over. "What happens now?" she asked when the last of his lieutenants had left. Seung-min looked up from the papers he'd been signing, documents that would ensure the families targeted by the fake lending scheme received compensation, that the legitimate businesses caught in the crossfire were made whole, that the loose ends were tied off cleanly. "That depends," he said, "on what you want to happen." She studied his face, looking for the calculation she'd expected to find there, the sense that she was still just a useful asset to be managed. Instead, she found something that looked almost like vulnerability. "I want the truth," she said, "about Park Min-jung, about whether I'm just the latest in a line of people you've used and discarded." His expression tightened. "Min-jung was my sister," he said quietly. "She died in a car accident 3 years ago. Nothing to do with any of this. Jin knew about her because he'd been in my organization long enough to know it was the one loss I've never gotten over." Amaya felt the last of her doubts crumble. "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," he said. "She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me get away with being an ass just because I was good at my job." Despite everything, Amaya laughed. "Well, you are kind of an ass sometimes." "Only sometimes?" "I'm being generous." He stood up, moving around the desk until he was standing in front of her chair. "Amaya," he said seriously, "I meant what I told you before. If you want to walk away from all this, I'll make sure you can. Clean slate, new start, no strings attached. And if I don't want to walk away, then you stay," he said simply. "Not as someone who owes me, or someone I'm protecting, but as someone who chooses to be here, as my partner." The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. "Partners in what, exactly?" she asked. "In whatever comes next," he replied. "In building something better than what we're tearing down. In making sure families like yours don't get caught in the crossfire of other people's wars." She looked into his eyes, dark, intense, but honest in a way that made her chest tight with something that might have been hope. "You're offering me a choice," she said. "I'm offering you everything." He corrected. "The choice is just the beginning." Amaya stood up, closing the distance between them, until she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his breathing had gone shallow, the careful control he was maintaining even now. "Then here's my choice," she said, reaching up to touch that scar with gentle fingers. "I choose you. I choose this. I choose us." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and starting an adventure at the same time. It felt like a promise made and a challenge accepted. It felt like the beginning of something that would be complicated and dangerous and absolutely worth it. "You're coming with me," he murmured against her lips, echoing the words that had started everything. "Yes," she whispered back. "I am." But this time, it wasn't a command or a threat. It was an invitation to a future they would build together, one choice at a time. The new community center stood where the fake lending office used to be, its bright windows and welcoming entrance a stark contrast to the predatory business that had once operated from the space. Amaya stood in the doorway, watching families come and go. People seeking legitimate financial counseling, job training, legal aid. People getting help instead of being hunted. "The city council approved the expansion," Seung-min said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. 3 more locations by the end of the year. She accepted the coffee gratefully, leaning into his warmth. "Your legitimate business ventures are getting suspiciously legitimate." "I have a good influence," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. It hadn't been easy, building something new while dismantling something old. There had been challenges from rival organizations, investigations from law enforcement, moments when Amaya had wondered if they were naive to think they could change anything. But here they were, still standing, still choosing each other, still making a difference, one family at a time. Devon called, she said. He got the job. The one in Seattle. The one in Seattle. Her brother had taken Seungmin's offer of a fresh start, moving across the country to work for a tech company that didn't ask too many questions about gaps in employment history. He says to tell you thank you. Again. He doesn't owe me anything, Seungmin said. Neither of you do. Amaya smiled, thinking about how far they'd all come from that dawn morning when 3 firm knocks had changed everything. I know, she said. That's what makes this real. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their small corner of the world become a little bit better, a little bit safer, a little bit more just. It wasn't the ending either of them had expected. It was so much better. Thank you for watching until the end. Korean Mafia lovers